The question is about science and spirit.
Science and spirit.
Yeah.
What about them?
Well, most of my life, I've loved both of them. Just absolutely loved both.
Yeah.
And now and then there's been a little bit of division that arose from that. And at this point, at some level, there's a real knowing that there is no contradiction between the two, but something less than a full understanding of how that can be. Because science, as I understand it, really comes down to finding things that are measurable and repeatable.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Right.
It also has these other aspects that are much easier to deal with. Like, fundamentally, it's a search for what is true, as obviously as this.
Seems to be. It seems to be, to me, it's the search for facts more than it is truth. That's one of the mistakes science makes, is they think they're searching for truth when actually the whole method is set up to find reliable facts. And the two things are completely different. Truth and facts you almost couldn't be more different than truth and facts. I know the way we get educated is we've got those two as almost the same thing. A fact is a truth. But I would suggest that a fact is a fact. So we give it its reality there. A fact is a fact and a truth is a truth. And they're not necessarily, ultimately they're the same, but we're not talking about it on that level at the moment. Two totally different things.
I'm going to take about a year to reflect on that.
That'd be pretty quick.
Well, I don't know how much time I have left.
Well, you throw a ball up, it comes down. Then they come up, why does it come down? And they go, well, because of gravity. And you go, okay, there's a fact. Right? But it's not necessarily... Science deals with the dream. It tells you facts about the dream. It doesn't tell you anything about a viewpoint outside of the dream. It's created in the dream to tell you about the dream, which is great. It can tell you a lot about the dream and a lot about the way the dream dreams. But it can't tell you anything about what's not in the dream, because what's not in the dream is of a completely different nature. It can tell you about being. It can't tell you anything about non-being, can it? In the same way, science can tell you a lot about life. It can't tell you anything about death, except to assume that it must be the absence of life. But that doesn't tell you anything, does it? It can't touch into that realm. It can't say anything whatsoever about something like death, can it? It can't say anything about it. All it can tell you is whether there is or isn't life. Right? And so it touches there and it says, well, death is the cessation of anything and everything. It just means, well, when we hit death, folks, we have nothing left to say from a scientific point of view. So we'll pretend like there's absolutely nothing to say. You see, even in the realm in which it operates, it has its uses and it has its limitations. The problem is when science bumps into its limitations, it immediately moves into a radical denial.
Well, people move into a radical denial.
Yes, same thing. Science is no science without people. Right. Yeah. Like I said, death is a good example. Science can't touch death. It can touch right up to the moment of death. It thinks it can touch dying, the disappearing of brain function and all that. But at death, it can't touch it. But it doesn't stop it from making assumptions about it, does it?
Well, there is science and the principle of science, and then there are scientists. And no scientist ever actually quite really lives up to it.
Of course, it's not possible.
They all get attached to their ideas and their theories.
Of course, right. There is no such thing. The history of it has taught us. There is no such thing as a method that can purify humans from being human. which is what the method's supposed to do. But then when you look into the history of science, you realize there's just there's a lot of shenanigans that go on.
Even today.
Even today. Sure.
Some of the stuff that gets passed off as science is pretty funny.
Sure. So anyway, where we were going with all this?
Well, it seems to work. I mean, I heard you. And I'm going to keep hearing that for a long time, I know.
Yeah, keep hearing it. I mean, science is trying, right? It studies, meditating monks, and it studies their brain waves, and it studies everything within the sphere of the material, right?
What it can measure, yeah.
When it can measure, right. But it has nothing to say. It has no reach. It has no scope. It's impossible to touch to something that's not material, right?
Yes.
And then it makes inferences.
There's the problem.
There's the problem.
Inferences, yes.
Right. Like, for instance, is the brainwave creating the state, or is the immaterial state creating the brainwave? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But we don't ask that too often. We just assume that the brainwave is creating everything, the brain structure, and we just keep moving on. So there's like in anything else in life, it's full of unconscious sort of inferences that often aren't actually looked at, Does the brain create consciousness, or does consciousness create the brain?
And who knows?
And
we seem to be learning that whatever consciousness is, it's not just in the brain. Mm-hmm. It's certainly bigger than that.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Even what they can measure seems to be showing that.
Even science knows it's throughout the whole body. Yeah. But it stops there because that's about as far as it can go right now. I'm not saying it might not break through, right? We all use our own limitations to break through them.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we have, isn't it? We use our concepts to break through concepts. We use our efforts to break through effort to the effortless.
I mean, one of the things I love about being here is you never ask me to believe any nonsense. And in fact, it seems like every time I've ever been in front of you, I was being asked to stop believing the nonsense that I already did.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. Because, of course, truth can only be that which exists when you don't believe in it anymore. It doesn't need belief. It doesn't depend on belief. If you totally disregard it and say that it doesn't exist, it's that which still does exist, unavoidably exist, right in the middle of you saying it doesn't. That's the nice thing about truth. It has nothing to do with belief. If we believe, that by its very definition means I don't know what I'm talking about. Let me tell you what I believe. It means I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm going to pretend like I do. But that's a little embarrassing to say, isn't it? It's much more acceptable to say, here's what I believe.
It seems that the reductionism and, the scientific method, it seems that within a certain realm it can accomplish a great deal.
Obviously. A great deal. Obviously, yes. Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where it seems that they're pretty good at sort of measuring something having to do with states.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the stateless state.
Pretty hard to measure.
Could they even recognize it?
By what means?
I don't know.
If you can recognize it, it's by its very nature, it's a state, or if it's a thing. It's like saying, there's something in the universe called dark matter. And it's like it doesn't exist. But it does exist, and it is matter. How do we know that? Because you're starting to be able to measure it. That's how we know.
Or dark energy.
Yeah.
It's getting even worse, from dark matter to dark energy.
It'll go on and on and on, right? Until it eventually comes back. Eventually, if it's ever going to get anywhere as far as truth goes, the science is going to go right back through the heart of the scientist. It's going to be like an arrow that's going to pierce right through the scientist. And maybe someday it will come back and slay the scientist. And when science comes back and slays the one who's doing it, hey, you never know what it'll reveal, huh?
Actually, physicists are hardly even scientists anymore. They've just about given up.
Yeah, they have to be sort of quasi-mystics to even go where it wants to go.
I mean, they're getting into string theory, which, they can't even test it. So
right.
They've given up science almost.
Yeah. It's a funny thing about truth. They're all going to learn sooner or later that you can't test it and it's not repeatable. It's the opposite of the method. How can you test something where there's nothing there to test? How can you test something where what you're testing is what's doing the testing? Do you see what I mean? I mean, if we're talking oneness, you got to take it all the way. Which oneness means that the one that's doing the testing is what the testing's looking for. How's it ever going to find it? See? It's based on a separation, which is great dream state stuff. It'll tell you a lot about the dream and how to manipulate it and how to do better things and even how it works.
How the dream state works.
Yeah, it's great at that. Yeah. You can fly rockets in the dream state. I mean, what could be cooler? But your rockets will never get you out of the dream state. You see what I mean? They'll just fly around endlessly, which is fascinating, don't get me wrong.
I have no idea what's happened here, but thank you.
Good. I've accomplished my task. All right. How fun was that?